Hey, good morning. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Adrian for today's webinar. Adrian?
All right, thank you, Susan. Good morning. Thank you all for taking the time to be here this morning to talk about the new climate change amendment that recently came out. Just to introduce myself, my name is Adrian Kroll. I am the Assistant Director of Management Systems and Quality at North Carolina State University Industry Expansion Solutions. And so I'll be leading you through the majority of this webinar, but I do have with me a team from DQS. So Candace, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Candace Orbaugh, and I am the Director of EHS programs here at DQS. We're a third-party certification body. We do ISO registrations, RC registrations, management system registrations. And June 1st will be my 25th year as a full-time auditor with DQS and UL. So I want to thank Adrian and the team here for allowing us to participate and be a part of this.
Yes, thank you so much, Candace, for being here. We really appreciate the partnership. I myself have been with IES for the past 10 years, and so we have the honor of being able to work throughout the state of North Carolina supporting clients. So love that. So let's jump right in. Let's talk a little bit about the background of what brings us here today. So back in 2021, just to kind of lay the groundwork, ISO signed into effect what's called the London Declaration. And in that declaration, they made a commitment to work with ISO members, national standards bodies, and with other stakeholders and partners to ensure that international standards and publications help to accelerate the achievement of the Paris Agreement, which many of you have probably heard of. So not only with the Paris Agreement, but also the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of which there are 17 of, and the United Nations Call for Action on Adaptation and Resilience. And so we left a few hyperlinks there for you that we will have this presentation available afterwards. So feel free to click on those if you want to know a little bit more about those items. But the London Declaration specifically included a commitment to foster active consideration of climate science and associated transition in the development of all new and revised international standards and publications. And what's really interesting that I just noticed this, and maybe many of you already had seen it there, but this is my first time noticing. Even when you visit the ISO.org website, if you look up any particular standard, they now have this that you'll see a little box. Like this, the one that's at the top, the right top of my screen, that talks about the Sustainable Development Goals. I mentioned there are 17 of them from the UN, and so they actually tell you which goals that particular standard is in alignment with. And so many of you may have already seen that. That was my first time this week visiting and noticing that. So I thought that was interesting that they've even incorporated it into their website. All right, so to continue on, so where are we today? A change went into effect on February 23rd of this year. So there is now an additional shall statement in section 4.1 and an additional note in section 4.2. So for those of you that are familiar with the standard, with many of the standards, you know that section 4 is context of the organization. And so 4.1 talks about understanding or determining external and internal issues that are relevant to your company's purpose, um, and the effect and how it affects your ability to achieve your intended results. And so now they've added in a shall statement, which we know when you see a shall statement, right, in the standard, that's a requirement. So they want you to determine whether climate change is one of those relevant issues. Okay, so that's been added into 4.1. And then for 4.2, which addresses the needs and expectations of interested parties. Remember, interested parties are those entities, those people, those groups. Remember, anyone that has an interest in your company's long-term success. So they've added a note into that section. Remember, notes are not auditable. They're there for additional guidance, but they want you to take note that relevant interested parties can also have requirements for you related to climate change. So just keeping those things into consideration. So these again, the shall statement in 4.1 and the note in 4.2 was what was added, what was added in that amendment on February 23rd. Okay. So if you're looking for this amendment specifically, how to find it, you can go to ISO.org. And you can either look up ISO 9001, and within that web page, it gives you an update of well, it tells you more about the standard and what it's used for, but it also gives you a picture at the bottom that you can click on that talks about this amendment. Or you can use this link we've provided for you, or you can search directly for it. It's about 3 pages. It's very short, 3-4 pages. It's free, totally free to download, but just keep in mind you will have to enter a credit card of some type or debit card in order to be able to purchase it and download it. You won't be charged. It is free, but just keep in mind you still have to add that in. Okay. And again, it's pretty short, about 3 or 4 pages. All right, so what was the intent then of the change? So really the intent was just to ensure that climate change issues are considered within your organization within the context of effectiveness of your management system, in addition to other issues. So when we talk about effectiveness of your management system, they added this specifically to 4.1. And so for those of you again that are pretty familiar with the standards, you know that Section 4.1 is an input to your management review. And within that management review is where you are looking at overall effectiveness of your management system. So that's they're talking about looking at how effective your system is and other issues. So thinking about how does climate change impact your risk and opportunity planning? How does it impact how you evaluate suppliers? How does it impact how you evaluate performance? Okay, so just think about some of those things, and we'll give you some examples as we continue on in the presentation. But the joint communique from ISO IAF also, well, this was where the amendment was first mentioned. In February, this communique was released, and they say specifically in there that the overall intent of clauses 4.1 and 4.2 remain unchanged. Okay, so you're still looking at consideration of internal and external issues and how it impacts the effectiveness of your system. They just want to make sure that by adding this new shall statement and this new note, you are considering climate change as one of those issues, as well as something that your interested parties could have requirements for you regarding. Okay, but the overall intent of those clauses has not changed. All right. So they also put out a quote from the Joint Technical Coordination Group on Management System Standards. And in here they talk specifically about how it's often a common misconception that climate change considerations are limited to those organizations that have implemented 14001. That's the environmental management system. But most organizations are likely to be affected by climate change in some way or another. You may need to adapt to it in order to continue to meet your objectives and fulfill your strategic purpose, or you may also be required by your interested parties to take action to mitigate climate change. So either way, whether we're talking about climate change adaptation or climate change mitigation, they have incorporated both of those into the standard. You know, the shall statement talks a little bit more about the adaptation part. The note that they added in 4.2 talks a little bit about more of the mitigation, but they're now addressed in this harmonized structure. Okay. All right, so if you're interested in reading that joint communique, we included a link to it here in the in the presentation. Let me see if I can, I was also going to pull it up here for you to show you. I might not be able to get to it. Give me one quick second. Okay, I may not be able to get to it, but let me try to click on it from here and open it up. There we go. All right. So if you're interested in that joint communique, we gave you the link. And so it was published here. And so this is pretty much what it looks like. It gives you a little bit more about the decision, when it was published. It breaks down, same thing we just saw, what the amendments were, the intent, and all of that is there for you here. Okay. Another thing that you can also find within that is what standards were impacted. So over 30 standards are being amended as part of this process. So I've only included here the ones that are that IES typically is the most involved with and that we support most of our clients with. So of course, the 9001 quality management system standard, 14,000 for environmental, 45,001 for for health and safety, 50,001 for energy, 27,001 for information systems, and then 22,301 for business continuity. But if you look in that joint communique, you'll notice there are several others, everything from graphic technology and tourism to knowledge management and food safety are also impacted. So definitely take some time to look through that joint communique if you have a chance. All right, so some additional impacts. So the technical committee TC 283 for occupational health and safety identified a need for further action. So they've worked in conjunction with technical committee 207, which is for environmental management, to develop proposals for a new guidance document to address occupational health and safety impacts of climate change. So they have established a working group that's going to develop they call it a PAS, publicly available specification, around the end of 2024 or early 2025. And so 283 also recently voted that they are going to begin a revision to 45,001 that's likely to publish in 2027. So while they're doing work on that revision, they'll make some additional decisions and considerations for whether or not they need to address climate change in 45,001 standard beyond what's already in that amendment. So just keep in mind, if you're specifically working with 45,001, that ISO PAS will hopefully be out by the end of this year, early 2025. And just for those that are interested, that may have had some question, ISO 9001 is also under development for revision as well. All right, so what's the application? So how does this apply to you as an organization? So here's some sample climate change impacts. Now, we work a lot with manufacturers, so these samples are tailored more towards manufacturing. However, I'm sure many of these will impact you even if you're a service provider. So think about things like supply chain disruptions. Extreme weather events can disrupt your supply chain. A good example, we have a client here in North Carolina that uses salt as a significant part of their production process. And they get that supply of salt from Wilmington. And so you can imagine we have hurricanes that regularly, hit the Wilmington area. And so if that were the case, they've had to have a plan in place as part of their risk and opportunity planning to address that. So think about how extreme weather events can impact your supply chain. Energy availability, so changes in climate patterns, how is that going to impact the availability or even the cost of energy? Or how does that change your operational costs? right? We know some of when we talk about energy, we know some of that is also political, right? So it could be not just a change in climate pattern, but even a perceived change, right, in climate patterns could impact that. Resource scarcity. So how does climate change lead to scarcity of things like water and raw materials? Can that impact production? Do you need to have a mitigation plan in place? Even things like regulatory compliance. So stricter regulations to combat climate change could increase your compliance costs. And product demand shifts, so shifting consumer preferences towards sustainable products. Those two in particular, regulatory compliance, product demand, we see that quite a bit. We have some clients that have really made an effort towards, we hear a lot now about sustainability and ESG, right? So ESG, the environmental, social governance factors, right? And so we have some clients who have some major retail customers that are requiring them to flow down environmental and sustainable requirements in their production process. And they're even looking to work with companies that are making particular strides towards sustainability. So just think about how that may impact you. Um, Also, infrastructure damage due to extreme weather. We had one company we worked with whose whole manufacturing floor, their plant floor was flooded out when there was a storm in the area. So thinking about how it impacts your infrastructure, workforce productivity, extreme heat. How can that decrease workforce productivity? And this one is might be surprising to you, but for those of you again that are pretty familiar with the standards, you know, section 714, and I'm speaking specifically of, you know, let me just talk to 9001, but section 714 in that standard talks about work environment. So the environment for the operation of your processes. And so I found, and Candace, I'll ask you this, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, or if you've seen something different. But I've seen a lot more certification bodies as part of that. One of the notes in that section is talking about um, physical requirements. So even things like heat, stuff like that. And so I've seen where some of the certification bodies are looking more closely at how are you handling heat, right? How are you, if your plant floor gets extremely hot, what steps are you taking to make sure the workforce is protected? You know, things like fans and brakes, having brakes built in, are important. And as we talk about extreme heat, changes in climate, that could become more of an issue. Have you seen that as well, Candace? No problem. I'll let you get off mute. Okay, Candace may be having some technical difficulties there, so no problem. We'll keep going. But yeah, so absolutely. So just think about things like that. And then lastly, quality control issues. So environmental conditions that are affected by climate change could impact the quality of your manufactured goods in some way. Oh, there's Candace. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, sorry, I couldn't get the mute to come off. It said I have unstable internet, but you know, we got that. But yes, you're right. Now, that also is mostly applicable for the 45K, the health and safety, worker productivity. But for quality, it could impact the quality of your product as well. So there is a relevance to every standard for um the extreme heat on the work floor.
Yeah, great point.
So
Great. Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
Mm.
Awesome. Thank you, Candace. Thank you. Very helpful. All right, good. So let's talk about some other examples. So risk related to climate change itself could include, like we talked about, extreme weather events that disrupt your supply chain or operations, or even cause injury to your workers, right? So think about how those weather events impact workers and making sure they stay safe. Actions associated with climate change adaptation could include maybe increased nighttime working in some sectors, maybe such as agriculture, um, in response to that excessive daytime temperatures. Think about also how there's going to be an associated increase in organization. I'm sorry, health and safety as well, right? So just think about that. Actions associated with climate mitigation, such as installation of on-site renewable energy generation, could introduce new risks. So again, OH&S risks are probably a big one there when we talk about maintenance of the equipment. So, so just keep those examples in mind too. So let's talk about some sample questions that you may ask. If you're just trying to, let's say you walk away from this webinar today and you go back and start working with your teams, and you're just trying to scope and ask yourself some questions. Okay, how can we possibly look at how we're impacted by climate change? Or let's say you are leading an audit program within your organization, and so you're looking at maybe audit questions that that you can incorporate into your checklist if you use them, or interviews with auditees. So think about things like, do large scale climate fluctuations influence your operations or your raw materials, or even how you dispose of things? Does local weather have an impact on production or on your service delivery or on your equipment? So again, like we talked about with temperature and humidity controls. Is the local area susceptible to hurricanes or drought or flooding or tornadoes, right? So think about how specific to your local area, what seems to be prevalent. Is the facility located in a floodplain? And if you're not sure, we included a link for you there. Then this one, of course, is specific to North Carolina flood maps. But so think about if you're in a floodplain, if that's likely to, again, impact you. And then lastly, does climate change pose an increased risk for insect infestation? Right? And if so, how would that impact your operations? So that was one admittedly I hadn't even really considered, but how does that change even with insect infestations? Okay. All right. So a couple other standards just to make note of as reference. Right now, especially for those of you that are already working with 14,001, there is another standard that is under development, 14,002-3, which is a guideline for using 14,001 to address environmental aspects and conditions within an environment. But that part 3 is specific to climate. So this document is intended for those of you seeking to address climate-related environmental aspects, environmental conditions, and even associated risk and opportunities. Okay, so that one is a good one. There's also another standard that's been out for a while, ISO 14091, which is adaptation to climate change, the guideline on vulnerability impacts and risk assessment. This one, I had a chance to read through it. I think is especially helpful because it gives you guidelines specifically for assessing risk and related impacts that are due to climate change. And so it gives you a really good methodology for how to implement a pretty sound risk assessment specific to climate change. Both of those are available at ISO.org. So I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity, you may want to download those as well to help you. And so with that, that's pretty much it. Do we have any questions? I wanted to open it up the chat now for anybody that has questions. It could be specific to this amendment, or if you have any other questions related to the standards or certification, where we'll do what we can to answer those. And while, oh,
I was going to say,
ahead.
thank you, Adrian. I just want to remind folks, if you'll use the Q&A button to ask your questions, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan. And while you are in the process of oh, I see one that came in. Is 1345 impacted by this? To my knowledge, not at this point. We do, I think, not to put you on the spot, Darren, but I saw, Darren, that you chimed in. Darren Reeves is one of the vendors that we work with quite often across the state to help with, he's an expert in 1345. So if you have any insight there, Darren, please feel free to type it in the chat. But to my knowledge, 1345 at this time is not impacted. It's certainly not mentioned on the list of those standards that were amended in the joint communique. Did someone ask a question there? Yeah, or Candace?
Someone's asking, is
Okay.
there a comprehensive list of all the standards, which there is a link to in your presentation. So the answer to that question would be yes. I'm not sure if we can go back to it.
Yes.
I put a link in the chat I put the link to the joint
Perfect.
communique in the chat. Okay.
Okay.
there
Thank
we
you.
go.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah. So it's there is a comprehensive list, Daniel. All right. To comply with the climate change added to the standard, can this be addressed through a risk log? I would say definitely, definitely yes. I don't see why not. I mean, it definitely is something you need to consider as part of your risk and opportunity planning. Candace, is that from a certification body standpoint? Is that something you would?
Yes. So if that's your current method, is to use a risk log, then that would absolutely be the way to show that you were in conformance with this, that you had considered it. So look at your existing system and use that, whatever you've already got in place for identifying the needs and expectations of interested parties. Use your existing system to just show that climate change was considered. And if it's applicable, again, use your existing system and do whatever you would with anything else that's applicable. You know, if that requires you to install operational controls, maybe you use a risk matrix, whatever method you're currently using, just apply that for this.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Candace.
So Candace, I want to add, I want to ask an additional question to that. So for those companies who are on the webinar and they are currently registered to the one of the standards that's affected, they need to go back and do this, right? Because they might have already reviewed it, you know, their relevant issues, internal, external issues. They might have already done that, and they might have already had a management review and reviewed it again. But now they need to go back and do that and show some documentation that has been done. So, and the second part of that is it's effective as of February 23rd. So
Yes.
certifying bodies will be asking that
Yes.
now. Is that correct? I'm sorry for the two-part question.
Yeah, that is correct. It went into effect February of this year. So yes, our auditors have been instructed to start looking for it now. And so, you know, the answer to the question is yes. Yes, we are looking for it, and it is a part of audits, both surveillances and recertifications and initials registrations.
Yeah. So just to be clear, if you've already done that as an organization, and whether it was through your management review or some other time that you've done it, you need to go back now and reevaluate the climate change state.
When you say if
to
you've
make
already
sure that
done
you
it, do you mean evaluate climate change? If you had already done that, that was already a part of your system?
No, not if you've
Oh,
already
okay.
No,
Do you mean
no,
an
I'm sorry,
annual?
I'm sorry for the confusion,
Do you
Candace.
mean an
If you
annual?
already reviewed your internal, Yeah, if you've already reviewed your internal and external issues and you had not included climate change in that evaluation, you now need to go back and do that now.
Sure,
Yes,
sure.
okay,
Wait,
that's, mhm,
you have a couple of options though. If what you're asking is, let's say we do an annual management review or an annual, which is
mhm,
not specified. It could be different for everybody. They could do quarterly, they could do monthly, they could do weekly. But let's say you've already done one. They release this as an amendment to the standard. You could certainly have an amendment to your management review or an amendment to your risk evaluation that addresses this specifically. So it's not saying you have to go back and do a whole new management review or a whole new risk
Right.
evaluation. You can
right,
specifically just look at climate change and
correct.
record it as an amendment to those.
Yeah.
So
Okay, correct. I'm sorry. I'm
Mhm.
just confused all of that. That's exactly what I was saying, Candace. I'm
okay.
very, very sorry to muddy the waters, but that was exactly what I meant. Anyway, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Barb. And because I think that actually goes along the lines of Stacy's question. She asked, with the addition to the standards, will the registrar need to evaluate the EMS or QMS currently for implementation? And so I think, Stacy, that's the same thing you're asking: is when does are they going to go back and look at it? So it went into effect in February. So as of now, they could be asking about that. Let me know, Stacy, if we didn't answer your question. And then thank you, Darren. Darren chimed in for ISO 1345. It does not address it at this time. It probably won't be because the FDA just adopted it as 21 CFR Part 820, which is in transition now. So thank you, Darren, for that. All right, great. Okay, Stacy, good. A few other questions. What's the deadline for making these changes? I don't know that there is a deadline. It's in effect immediately.
There is not a deadline per se, but let's say you have your next audit and there's no evidence that it's even been considered, your auditor will probably write a nonconformance. So I guess you could call that a deadline.
Mhm,
But there's not an official one. The amendment is in effect now. So
Right.
there should at least be some evidence that you've considered the impact of climate change. Even if all the actions are not implemented, you should have at least considered it and have some evidence to that fact.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit confusing, Candace, because traditionally when we've had a revision to the standard, there's been an implementation period.
Yes.
And so there's no implementation period. This became effective on February 20th.
This is kind of historic. I don't believe there's been an amendment such as this in the past.
Yeah, so that answers, I think, Barry's question. So yes, Barry. Just to be clear, that shall statement is auditable after February of 2024 by certification body. So yes, so just as Candace mentioned, you do need to be prepared for that by the time you have your next
Mhm,
external audit. And Barbara, I
mhm.
think you froze. Were you gonna add something there? There you go. Okay.
Yes, I just want everybody to make sure they heard what Candace said, that if you don't have evidence that you consider climate change, that your certification body will write a nonconformance against that.
May
And
write a
so you
nonconformance. Yeah.
may write
Yeah,
a
yeah.
nonconformance against
Yeah.
it. So, so I want to make sure everybody understands that.
Okay, so someone asked, my client is undergoing a significant expansion, which will unfortunately increase electrical consumption a good bit. What is a good way to say we address climate change as part of the review and planning? That's a good, yeah, go ahead.
That remember though that it's not whether or not you're using more electricity. It's whether or not climate change impacts your you have to consider whether climate change causes an impact to your system. Now again, I just want to be clear that it's not just reducing it. They're not saying you have to reduce your electrical consumption. It's assessing how climate change it will impact your business. You know, they're a little bit different. And if you decide that it does impact your business, then you take steps and figure out how you're going to minimize the impact or reduce the risk.
Yeah, hopefully that helps. I'm not sure who asked that, but if we didn't answer your question, let us know and we can try to dig deeper. One quick side note that Darren also mentioned, which is a great point. Thank you, Darren, for this. Often companies that are certified to 1345 are also certified to 9001. So just because it's not impacting you on the 1345 side, still think about how it's impacting you on the 9001 side. So that's a great point. All right, Frank, since the intent of 4.1 and 4.2 remains unchanged, is that why the traditional 3-year transition period is not in effect? I would say so, Frank. That's right,
Yeah.
yes, because this is just an amendment. It's not a major change to the stand. Like we said, the stand 9001 specifically is under development for update, but yeah, this is just an amendment. Yeah. All right, Darcy, can this be something we add to our contingency plan procedure? And I think we answered that. Your risk management plan, contingency plan, you can absolutely add it to that.
If that is how you address it now,
Mhm.
then that's where you would add it. But where do you currently address potential risks and needs and expectations of interested parties? What's your current method?
Mhm.
But yes, you can do it anywhere you please.
Right,
I
right.
would just say, I would just caution you to use your existing system for this.
Yeah, great point. James asked, is this in preparation for mandatory ESG reporting here in the US? So we talked about James early on. It definitely is in alignment with the Paris Agreement and some of the things that are coming out from the UN. I don't know specifically if it's in preparation for ESG reporting. It may it may have something to do with it, but unfortunately I can't answer that in particular. If anybody else knows, please feel free to chime in. Okay, is this change currently active? Yes, yep. So
Yes.
that we answered that. Okay, how can we? Oh, we can talk about that. How to? Oh, Barbara, thank you. You already answered that. How can we view it? Um, Natalie asks, can you raise a change report to address this amendment?
Again, I would suggest you use your existing system. If your existing system would be to use a change report, then by all means. As long as the way that you address it is aligned with what your current procedures say. Hopefully that answers that question. I'm not sure.
That's good. Okay. Then Catherine. Oh, welcome, Catherine. Good to see you on here. Can you define climate change? For example, hurricanes happen and a client may have a strategy for supply chain disruption. So what would a change to the climate be? Is there a definition that we can use to explain to clients? Yeah, that's a good question, Kathy, because within the amendment itself, I don't know that it gives like terms and definitions because climate change is so broad. Um, I'm imagining that maybe we could use the UN definition of climate change. I'm not sure. Let me just go
I
ahead.
believe there is a definition that they released along with this
Did
in
they?
there.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't quote me on that, but I believe they did.
Okay. Okay.
So
Within that, I might have missed it in that joint communique.
yeah, I'm trying to search for that question specifically. I can't quite see all the Q&As to look at it, but yeah, go up to the top.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I could be wrong. or it could be at the
Okay.
end.
Okay. And I have the ISO 9000. I downloaded the amendment, but I don't recall there being anything in there that gave a definition of
There's a
climate change.
document that has the definitions. I will try to find it.
Okay, thank you, Candace. Yeah,
Sure.
Kathy, we'll try to find that. That's a great question. Okay, if a company has a sustainability group who has done a materiality study for climate change and has a program in place, does that suffice, or do we need a specific risk log for each standard?
I would certainly accept that.
Yeah, I
It,
would.
it,
Hmm.
if it's going to answer the question of whether or not climate change was considered, then I would, I can't imagine any auditor challenging that.
Yeah, thank you for that question too. All right, what kind of evidence or record is desired to address this requirement? Okay, so I think we've talked about that
Mhm.
pretty extensively. Like Candace said, whatever you're using, you know, is whether it's a risk law, whether it's a procedure, meeting minutes could certainly be, you know, especially if you're talking about it as part of your management review, then those could all be used as records of evidence. Um, okay. Oh, now this is a good question. I know someone else has helped, and Barbara, you may be able to answer this. If Barry says, if not for this seminar, I would not have been aware of this amendment. Is there somewhere I should be checking to see when changes are made at the ISO site? Historically, my certification body would let me know when changes to the standard were coming.
Yeah, I'm gonna defer that to Candace.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes, is there a certain, because I've had
Oh,
someone else ask this question too. Is there a certain place people should be checking to see when changes are made? Like, because Barry says if not for this webinar, he wouldn't have known.
yeah, we use the ISO.org site, but we also sent out a notice to all of our customers, all of our contacts and clients. And then of course the auditors themselves, but you know, it could be a while until the auditors are on site. So we did send out communication. So all our customers and every registrar should be doing the same. But the official source is the ISO.org website.
Hopefully that helps Barry. All right. Since climate change is one of 17 for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, what is the possibility of other SDG goals being considered for inclusion? That's a great question, Frank. I'm not sure. I can't answer that. I know a lot of this kind of like we talked about back in 2021. Um, ISO, when they put out their London Declaration, I know that they really wanted to uh, go along with the Paris Agreement and the U.S. Goals, but who's to say other development goals may not make their way into ISO standards at some point in the future? But I can't answer that. That's a great question though.
Mhm.
Okay. And then it looks like people are asking about okay, and Susan put in the chat. Thank you, Susan. A copy of the recording and PowerPoint will be sent out after today's webinar. So thank you for that, Susan. All right. And if there are any other questions, sorry, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We still have some time, but as we're going through that, if anybody is, as you're thinking through things, feel free again to write it in the Q&A or type it in the chat. And I'll ask Barbara if you would to just give us a brief overview of IES and how we can specifically, you know, help you with this and other areas.
Yes, and my internet is also unstable, so I hope I don't freeze up on you. But yes, we're the Industry Expansion Solutions. We're out of the College of Engineering at NC State, and we do lots of things other than quality management systems. So you can see that listed on the slide here. And so we have advanced manufacturing, business growth and innovation, process optimization, such as lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, excuse me, supply chain optimization. We have a supplier matching program too that is really that we really ramped up. So if you're having challenges or difficulties trying to find suppliers that you need in the state of North Carolina or in the United States, we have a full network that we work with. We are part of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and we are the North Carolina MEP. And under that program, we can try to help you find suppliers in the state of North Carolina who can help you with your supply chain. And if we can't find somebody in North Carolina, we will go out to our national network. Every state has an MEP center, including Puerto Rico. And so there are 51 of us in this network. And so if we can't help you locally, we can try to help you nationally to find suppliers. And there's no charge for that whatsoever. We have an OSHA education center as well. So we train trainers for OSHA. We have open enrollment classes for OSHA. And so we just do a lot of different things. And so our mission is to help small to medium-sized manufacturers in North Carolina to stay competitive and keep jobs in North Carolina. So that is our mission. And so we want you to feel free to contact us for any issue or gap or anything that's keeping you up at night. We encourage you to give us a call and we can help you. If we don't have the internal resources, which we have a lot of, if we don't have the internal expertise, we have partners that we collaborate with that can help you as well. And so Adrian has put up, another slide that talks about our key programs. But Adrian, if you can go to the next slide. This is our regional manager. They're our account team that are out across North Carolina. You can see the regions that they're in. They live in those regions, so they know and understand the regions that they live in and the challenges that manufacturers face in those areas that they're in. And so they are available to come out and talk to you at no charge to assess what what you might be going through, your needs, and then try to provide a gap, a stopgap for you in terms of services that might help you close the gaps and to to address some of the challenges that you have. And so you see they have the names and numbers and email addresses on here, so you can identify your region and who your regional manager is. And so anytime that you have any kind of issue, question, or anything about your business, you can definitely contact one of them. And then Adrian is over the management systems area. And so if you have a question about that, you can always contact her directly. She'll be glad to address anything that you have, any questions that you have in that area. She has 3 team members who are versed in 9001, 14,001, 45,001, also in aerospace and in automotive. So we do a wide variety of things, and we are the best kept secret in North Carolina, and we don't want to be that. We're trying to overcome that. So again, if you have any questions, you can contact the regional manager, you can contact Adrian, or you can contact me. I can put my information in the chat as well.
Yeah,
Adrian,
thank you.
is that another slide?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Okay, I'm going to put my information in the chat.
Okay.
Is there another question in the Q&A?
I don't see one, and I've been behind the scenes, Kathy, trying to find that definition of climate change, but I still haven't found anything. So if I do, we know where to find you, Kathy. So we'll definitely make sure we send that out if we find out some more information about how that's being defined specifically.
Yeah, Adrian, if we find that, I can include it in the post-webinar email that goes out, and if not,
Okay.
we can send it out later.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you, David.
Adrian, I'm not seeing any others, so with that, I'm going to thank you and Candace for being with us today, and also a thanks to Barbara. Appreciate all of your assistance with the webinar. It's very informative. As a reminder to everyone, we will send out a link to the recording and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. That'll come out in the next day or two, and it will be from the IES Zoom user account, so be on the lookout for that. And one more item, I would like to extend an invitation to you all to not only attend our future webinars, but to attend our annual manufacturing conference, which will be held May 13th and 14th in Durham. It's going to be a good program this year. We have early bird pricing now through Friday, so we do hope to see you all there. And again, I thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you soon. Take care.